Thank you so much, Dr. Bridget Ssamula, for taking the time out from your very busy schedule. I know August must be an extremely busy period for you. And, we really, really are grateful for ECSA's contribution towards our SAICE Durban Women's Month initiative, coming on as our lead sponsor towards our Women's Day event. We are really thankful, and we can see that ECSA is making those changes that we want to see in the industry, and we hope that others follow suit and see the benefits that can be derived when you do have diverse thoughts in your organization and in your people. So thank you so much. And just to all our viewers, work together and let's break barriers and empower each other for a more equitable future. So thank you so much, Dr. Ssamula.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my career really started mostly in academia. And so I'll start a little bit with the academia side. I think the biggest change for me was the transformation. When I started off at University of Pretoria way back in 2002, 2004. So it's a couple of things, but transformation being the largest one. Our classes generally, our lectures, our first year students became more diverse. And there was always this hike that happened when there were interesting projects that were happening. So people got interested in civil engineering a lot, depending on how many cranes were up in the air, on the road, and so on and so forth. But I think also the biggest change was when there was a policy directive around BBBEE, around training, intentional training, providing of scholarships, where you saw a lot of previously disadvantaged students who were really star students in mathematics and any of the physical sciences come through and sit to do engineering. And so by the time I left, it was quite interesting. I had, the classes was 70 to 80% previously disadvantaged students, and about 90% of them had bursaries. Now that for me, and because I stopped really doing a lot of lectures in 2013 when I joined ACOM, and I think at that point is when I saw that we had really gone through such a transition, and it had brought everybody along. Academia, there was industry, there was government providing the right policy, and I think that's important. Within the workplace, though, the biggest change that I see is the ability to accommodate what the female civil engineer looks like. And so it's no longer, if they don't go to site, then they will not get. So there is no right way to becoming an engineer. There is no right way to go through your years of professional development. And so there's been a lot of accommodation of what happens with women when they're young, as they're starting to grow their families, but also want to do their registration, making sure that sites can be able to accommodate them so that they're not being seen, if you cannot do the tough job, then you're not an engineer. So the face of an engineer in terms of diversity and inclusion has really grown. And this cuts across even gender, even religion as well. I know many workplaces have the ability to accommodate engineers of many religious belief systems and backgrounds, what they do for them in terms of Ramadan, for example, what they do, for example, during Sabbath, and anybody who's Jewish can work till half day, so that you can see that the workplace is starting to accommodate a lot of what individuals have gone through, what the world looks like. I think COVID then formally introduced us to our employers as though we had a life,
Yes.
Before nobody knew your life. You came into work and you worked and you went home. Yes. But now they saw your home, your children. So your life, your work-life balance almost merged for those 2 years. And I think it has made many employers a lot more flexible about what work looks like, the difference between having somebody sitting at a desk and the difference between having somebody be productive. Anybody who's in consulting knows those utilization hours, those 40 hours a week. But now we know that you can make up your 40 on your own time and be productive. That does not mean when there is a toothache, you do not go see the dentist. Whereas before, I just don't know what we did when we had toothaches, right? We probably took half-day leave, or I don't know what we did, but it's just changed the way employers see their employees. And with that has come a lot of the bigger drive around having a more diverse and inclusive work environment, but also academic environment. Thank you. Thank you. So I think a lot of credit goes to the predecessors before me. The drive around physical transformation of what the representation looks like, whether for the councils, for the moderators and assessors, that has changed quite a bit. And it is more representative, even in disciplines, right? Because there was a time when ECSA was very predominantly driven to the civils, because yes, there are many, but that's not all there is. And so being a lot more inclusive in terms of even the disciplines, making sure that we are paying attention to every single discipline that exists, making sure that we have representation, male, female. So now we are at the level when we are talking about, because it is an organization that relies a lot from the assistance of the peers, right? So we rely a lot on the moderators, assessors, reviewers, because we use the peer review mechanism, and that's what we use for registration, even accreditation of engineering programs. We get people from academia and people from industry. So on that front, we are making a lot of effort. What we need to do is document it so that we have a formalized knowledge transfer and skills transfer process, because we need to be a little bit more intentional around it, so that we know that we have a pipeline of people who are able to assist us, because it's a modus operandi that works. It helps people in industry give back. And there are people who've given blood, sweat, and tears to the documents that we have today, to some of the processes that we follow today as an institution, and a lot of credit goes there. And so we've tried to make that transformation happen. Where we have the gap, though, is around the pipeline, right? In growing our pipeline, what our pipeline looks like, because, and I keep giving them an example around when I was on the board of SA Express, there was a program, a CSI program that we were pushing for girls in the rural areas who are interested in aviation, and taking them to flying school. And so we were having better results with the boys than we did with the girls. And then we try to dig in a little bit deeper, because flying school is not really cheap for any organization, and for them to spend all of that time and then not pass, we needed to dig a little bit deeper, not abandon the process. And I think that's what diversity does when you're in a workplace. Diversity says, let's dig a little bit deeper and find out why exactly the women are failing. And so we did, and we found primarily embedded in everything that they were saying was a fear, just an inherent fear. So what we then did in terms of our recruitment process was incorporate an advanced driving course. So they had to go for an advanced driving course, and the ones who passed the advanced driving course, it's a lot cheaper to pay for the advanced driving course, but the ones who got the training and they passed the advanced driving course, we then took them through to flying school. And we got dramatically very different results because of that. So I think we haven't been doing that with our pipeline. We haven't been digging deep and finding out what's happening with our girls, what's happening with previously disadvantaged individuals. We've done research that still says it takes about twice the amount of time for people of color rather than white people to register. And yes, we can say the workplace also plays a role, the workplace in terms of giving the opportunities in order for the student, the candidates to go through all of the right aspects. You need to almost have that mentor who cares. And so that mentorship process within the workplace might be one of the reasons for failing. But we've decided, let's work in partnership. And I think the partnership with the voluntary associations is going to be very important within this environment. They do have very targeted programs because there are many issues. Some, it could be public speaking. And I actually think we need to do a Toastmasters a little bit more, especially for our girls, because I think that Toastmasters process is going to be more important. And, it's quite sad for somebody to go through 5, 6, 7 years of training and they fail on being able to explain a complex problem, right? And that's the very core. So if you can't explain a complex problem, which are the initial outcomes, how are you going to get to the further outcomes? And so trying to get very targeted programs, whether it's the writing, whether it's the communicating. Some, it's fundamentally that they have gaps. They've done the design and they haven't had the construction experience. And some have had the construction experience, but not the design experience. So being able to run that, and I think that's what we are trying to do differently, so that we make sure that we are a little bit more intentional. So for us as an organization, with our staff, with our members who assist us, those strides have been made. And I think my appointment is one of the ones that is testament to opportunities like that. However, I think where we fall seriously short is our professional candidates. It's our responsibility to make sure that balance happens. So we are targeting very clear programs and stretch targets to be able to see how many women have now gone through, how many youth are now going through, how many people of color are going through, and not taking them all in one basket, but finding out what is the problem, how can we help, and then designing those programs in a very targeted, specific way, so as to increase our chances of going through. We're even introducing some aspects like blind moderation so that we could be able to do that. I think the blind moderation also helps. So in case there's any subjective bias, we're going to be able to look at that. So there's quite a bit we need to do, but we are getting there. Yeah. ECSA is a regulator, and in that role of regulation, there's only a limited pool of what we can be seen to do without looking like we're interfering. But I think one of the areas is around thought leadership, right? So we've been doing quite a bit, and we have a research team that does quite a lot of work around what's happening in the industry, what's plaguing the industry. And so some of the things that are plaguing the industry is what are people struggling with, what are engineering students struggling with, what are engineers struggling with in order to be able to renew their registration, just stay in the profession. I think for me, that just stay in the profession is something that we are not really addressing. It worries me a little bit. Currently, as we sit, we are only covering 40%. Yes, guaranteed, ECSA is right now a voluntary registration process, but that when we implement the EPA Act with identification of engineering work, that will change. However, the more scary statistic is the one from university, right? So 20%, we only attract 20% of students the year they graduate into candidacy. And I think what is happening, yes, we know engineers are really great. They make really great managers. It is true, right? Our problem-solving skills are required in every sector. And I think that alone is testament to a lot of our thought process in terms of how we are wired to be able to think. We can be able to get multiple levels of information and then be able to make meaningful decisions from a risk-based area, and that really comes through from our education pedagogy. That one's clear. However, we need to keep them in engineering as well, because we need to be a little bit intentional. There's a lot of resources that go through making sure that maths and science and engineering as a sector for the country is important and is enough and is valuable, right? If we get to the part where we have aging infrastructure, and then we say only registered engineers will lead projects, yet we are looking at only 30% of engineers being registered, and all of them are at a bit of a certain age, there's a level of responsibility that we need to be able to take to grow the pipeline intentionally so that they can be able to serve the country better. So I do think on that particular one, we are working quite intentionally in trying to lead and understand, number one, what value there is in one staying in engineering, the international recognition our engineers get in terms of the work that they're able to do, but also even making sure that that cuts across the gender aspects. So sensitizing people about just comparing the best practice, right? Because we then sit in a position where we are saying, this work environment pays for its members' registration. This work environment does not have a candidacy program, neither do they care that their registration is then being able to be paid for. That therefore means that this particular sector is not thriving to be able to grow and have an intentional pool and pipeline of individuals. If you think about agriculture engineering, it is one of those disciplines that has such a dwindling number, yet food security is on the SDG goals and it's going right up. So I think it's those things that we need to be able to let government know. So over and above the gender sensitivity, for example, the workplace, what are we doing for women in the workplace? How can we be able to accommodate that one who takes 2 years off because she wants to raise her children? How are we doing it in an intentional way? So thought leadership is important, making sure that at every platform, I am looking to grow and attract more engineers in ECSA. I think that for me is going to be a huge clarion call, because I think it is important that the staff, as much as they want to be able to engage with the discipline, having somebody with a lived experience really assists. And as we look to getting to identification of engineering work, the sector compliance, identification of engineering work and what it will mean, and the thought leadership and managing our stakeholders, getting more engineers into ECSA will be quite important. It will give them a break from the hard hats, but it does not give you a break from the sector in giving back in areas where it matters. So thought leadership becomes quite important role that we can be able to play within the platform that we have. I do think we've marketed engineering in a very one-dimensional way. My career is not one-dimensional at all, and yet I've always remained in the discipline.
Yes.
Even when I was selling a large engineering job to a French-speaking client, I was still selling engineering. Even when I was there was a job when I was in the US, I was in charge of growing their major markets in Boston, Atlanta, Florida. There were about 6 or 7 markets. But that was still engineering, because when you're approaching a city to be able to see how the city can grow and to find space in the city, you focus on infrastructure. Infrastructure is engineering. So I think we've sold engineering in a one-dimensional way. And I think if there is anything that many of the changes ECSA has brought along in terms of how do you register an engineer, it's that the engineer is not one-dimensional. The problems are not one-dimensional. They don't always belong in our project on a site with a hard hat. Yeah. So and I think if we do that, then girls don't have to battle between doing one or the other, because engineering can look like not a hard hat. You can't be wearing a suit with heels, but still be an engineer. And I think our level of being analytical in terms of being able to solve problems, I do think that is the one area where we've fallen into the trap of selling engineering in one way. And I think we can attract more people if we just opened up to what engineering truly is. And literally it's everything. It's everything that you wear, that you walk in. Look at shoes, right? There's an area of engineering that I know we don't really focus on in South Africa, but if you think about the design of just sportswear, that's engineering, right? So I think there are many ways in which we can be able to sell that and still keep people interested in STEM. And that's where we need to grow and mature as an economy, I think, so that we can then be able to assist on that. So it will be very interesting to ask the Batu guys for their sneakers, do they have an engineer on board, right?
Yes.
When they're doing their designs, because truly that's if you think about sportswear, it's a whole industry that has built on engineers streamlining body movements to be able to enhance the impact and ability of your body and your exercise and your sport to be able to increase performance. That's it. So it's interesting, if we look at it that way, we would attract more women rather than telling them they'll be climbing up electric poles, climbing up on sites. That's never going to be attractive. It really isn't. Yeah, for young girls. Yeah. I think the one piece of advice that I would give them is there is nothing that they should go through that is not valuable. When we sometimes join the workplace, we are very picky about the jobs we're given, the roles that we're given. Now I'm writing minutes, now I'm doing, it's boring. I had to count cars, right? And anybody who's done traffic counts, I mean, you just watch your brain cells deteriorate. By 12 o'clock, you're like, 6 more hours, how am I going to survive? So by the time peak time comes at 4 o'clock, you're tired, but the cars are many, right? So there is no job that does not teach you a certain skill. And engineering is as vast as the skills needed to solve a problem. And that's why that job might be mundane, but that job might be the one that makes or breaks your business or your project or your area of delivery 20 years later or 18 years later. And your solutions will be the same solutions because you will be thinking about the project very differently because you did it. And so everything in your life goes towards what you need to do. So hang in there and do that. But I always like to give this piece of advice around, because engineering is always so vast. So the supplementary piece of advice would be careful where you get your first job. That is going to be the discipline that you probably stay in. So once you finish your civil engineering degree, yes, I know there's pressure. Where will I work? Some people already have their bursaries set out. But even if you go to a consulting firm, as much as they put you in water and you want, the highways, just keep pushing and say, but I really like highways, because you will become a water engineer within 5 years, right? And so just be very mindful as you do your degree, as you do go through your work experience in the various sectors, be very mindful of what brings you joy. What's relatable, what's exciting, what's passionate, and that's where you end up specializing, because engineering is quite vast. And even when you've specialized, it will be more diverse. So don't get too fixated about being too specialized. Engineering will always have space for more areas of specialization. So yeah, those are my 2 pieces.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bridget Ssamula, for taking the time out from your very busy schedule. I know August must be an extremely busy period for you, and we really, really are grateful for ECSA's contribution towards our SAICE Durban Women's Month initiative, coming on as our lead sponsor towards our Women's Day event. We are really thankful, and we can see that ECSA is making those changes that we want to see in the industry, and we hope that others follow suit and see the benefits that can be derived when you do have diverse thoughts in your organization and in your people. So thank you so much, and just to all our viewers, work together and let's break barriers and empower each other for a more equitable future. So thank you so much, Dr. Ssamula.
Thank you very much. Thank you.